Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Quake Mod Madness. It's felt like a little while since I've dabbled in Quake, but what with it being that special time of the year, I thought I'd try and dig up something Christmassy. Lo and behold, the Quake Christmas Jam 2018 fell neatly at my feet. This is a collection of 21 maps, including the hub map here, and if I'm going to be honest, the first map in the collection is quite possibly the most Christmassy it is going to get. So enjoy it while you can. They're clearly getting it out of the system early here, but it begins by having you dismount your demon-led sleigh, which is quite the sight, I have to admit. I wonder if they've got reindeer names. First one at the front, instead of Rudolph, it's just Kaplach! But I digress. The aim of this map, of course, is to infiltrate this house and leave some presents under the tree, only the fireplace has been left lit. Do you not want presents? Because this is how you don't get presents. This is how you end up with, at best, coal, at worst, a smoldering Santa corpse on the fireplace. And trust me, that is something you don't want to have to show your kids on Christmas morning. Naturally, this turn of events means we now have to seek alternative entry into this surprisingly well-secured household, which, as you can plainly see, also means dealing with the private security. We've got crossbow guys, we've got doggos, and wouldn't you know it, we've got death knights hiding in snowmen. Dealing with the riffraff above ground soon gives way to the basement level below, which is surprisingly spacious for your average suburban home, but no less awash in hired goons for you to dispense with some Santa-based shotgun justice. After the bodies have well and truly hit the floor, you'll find the only thing barring your progress is a troublesome gap that can't be crossed via conventional means. In this case, you'll need to keep an eye out for a wonky bit of shelving, which can be helpfully dislodged with a well-placed axe strike. This will bring down the crate, which you can then shunt along the way and make that gap much easier to cross. Intriguingly, this box also appears to be constructed of surprisingly inflammable wood, allowing you to also block off that flame vent and make additional headway. Fiddling with the valve down below apparently puts out the fireplace above, but not before things start going a little Michael Bay. Emerging slightly singed from the flaming basement, you'll find that the above-ground section has had a fresh restock of enemies eager to prevent you from taking a trip down the chimney. After that, however, the only thing preventing me from getting back on the roof was figuring out how to get back on the roof. There was definitely a trick to it, something that was eluding me, something that I'd have to apply some advanced mental calculations in order to divine, but eventually I stumbled on the solution.
Oh, you used the sleigh! God, I'm an idiot!
Back on the roof, you deal with a bunch of death knights, and then it is attempt number 2 at getting down the chimney. Success! And now we get to fulfill our true objective, spreading joy and happiness, placing presents under the tree, and did I just hear a goddamn... It's a shambler! I'm just thinking out loud here, but am I actually the bad guy in this situation? I mean, this is their house, right? This is a shambler's attempt at living some kind of normal life, getting a nice place in the suburbs, trying to get on with the neighbors. They even put up a tree trying to fit in, and then some asshole with a shotgun breaks in the house, blows up the basement, and now I've committed murder. Who's the real monster here? Jesus Christ. I mean, that's probably the floor gun, that's probably some kind of vengeful spirit. I am not the harbinger of joy here, I am the harbinger of death. If there's one small positive that comes out of this situation, though, it's that I managed to clear out that infestation of... whatchamacallit, those monsters from Pitch Black. Y'all ever seen Pitch Black? It's that film with Vin Diesel. It's pretty good. There's a bit where the monster just goes... Anyway, that's Christmas well and truly ruined. You're welcome. Apparently I ruined it so hard that even the Krampus turned up to try and stop me, but guess what? I have an escape sleigh. And with a little bit of luck, the entire place will burn to the ground and there'll be no evidence that I was ever here, apart from maybe all of the demon witnesses, but we can deal with that. It's very much worth mentioning at this point that one of the chief reasons that I find the 2018 Quake Christmas Jam so interesting is that there's actually a restriction on how big the maps in this pack can actually be. So for all authors that participate, they are restricted to a level that must fit within a 1024 unit box. As for what happens within that box, well, it's entirely up to the author themselves. Up to them to make the most of it, to let the imaginations run wild, and also make good use of the assets afforded to them, courtesy of the Arcane Dimensions mod, which wonderfully expanded the horizons of what's possible in Quake mapping. The end result, of course, is quite the eclectic collection of maps, coming in all degrees of complexity, in all sorts of styles, and in the case of Hall of Shards here, it has the unenviable position of being my immediate follow-up from a Christmas romp. In comparison, this is a heck of a lot more straightforward, much less densely packed than the Christmas romp, favoring instead much more airy open spaces, even in this subterranean section here. But if I had to point out one of the more memorable aspects of this map, it would certainly be the inclusion of various magical textbooks. The one down here allowing you to casually detonate a vor before it blows up in your own face, which, let's face it, is kind of par the course when it comes to me and explosive materials. After that, it's some key collection, some switch flipping, and then a swift descent back to the halls you originated from, where you'll deal with a few extra ruffians, and of course, an angry stone golem. But all in all, short, sweet, largely inoffensive. Wish it kinda did a little bit more with those magical textbooks. Hop, skipping and a jumping between a few of the maps here. The next one that certainly left a mark on my memory was Aftermath. This is a level that seems to take place in the midst of a catastrophic slipgate accident. It is a wonderful tangle of industrial elements that have been flipped, melded, squished, squashed, and left to drift in some kind of formless void. This all comes together to create a very visually distinctive level, but as for the content of what you'll be doing within it, it somehow manages to be even simpler and straightforward than Hall of Shards, simply requiring you to hunt down and eliminate all of these so-called anomalies during the course of the level, and this translates to any enemies that turn up. Just kill them all. Once you've done that, the exit will open, and you will be free to leave. If I had to point out one of the trickier aspects of this map, it would be simply the act of moving from one platform to the next, but even then, that is made a little easier to deal with thanks to a lower setting of gravity. It's certainly an example of a map hedging its bets on visuals when it comes to the content of the gameplay, because, yeah, it's not particularly difficult, and I'd say that the most frustration I ever experienced during the course of this was actually figuring out where the final enemy had gotten itself stuck. Air-gapped is an interesting map to play directly after Aftermath. They certainly feel themically linked, what with the subject of slipgate mishaps, but rather than dropping you off somewhere in the formless void, this instead drops you off in some kind of vine-encrusted jungle base, maybe somewhere adjacent to the Plutonia experiment. Mercifully, this map features roughly 0 hit scanner-style enemies. However, you will have to contend with a contingent of grenade launcher-wielding nutjobs, the occasional rocket-launching goon, and a handful of grunts in various states throughout the level. I'm pretty sure one of them even has the temerity to wield a plasma gun. Gimme. One aspect I quite enjoy about Air-gapped is how it ties in its theme of a slipgate malfunction into the progression of the level itself. The big slipgate at the top, if you pass through, will naturally return you to the start point over and over, but if you fall to the pit below and deal with the onslaught of enemies, you'll eventually be able to hit a switch that will grant you additional slipgates, putting you in much more advantageous spots, such as this one, which grants you access to the Widowmaker shotgun. For those of you who aren't acquainted, it's a triple barrel, and I love it unconditionally. Now, I can't entirely be sure whether hitting the switch at the bottom is conditional for these shoot switches appearing on this section, but taking care of all of these will actually change the destination of the big slipgate at the back. Jumping through will grant you access to a previously unreachable section of level, and at this point you've got a few choices. You can continue on upwards, or you can explore further to the back. This will lead you to a shaft which will drop you down to some helpful armor, and ultimately lead to you looping back around through the slipgates. But surprisingly, going through one of the other pit slipgates plonked me back at the start, whereupon I managed to bag myself a lightning gun. A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Returning to the upper levels is pretty much where the remainder of the action resides in this level, and is where you'll be able to finally bag yourself the gold key. This is also where you first encounter, depending on the order in which you play these levels, the mech. The mech is a pretty cool enemy, raining down missiles from afar. Never really felt like too much of a pain in the ass to fight. Sure, it's tanky on the health front, but it was always placed in a relatively manageable position. From the gold key onwards, shit generally hits the fan, what with an influx of these hoverboard grunts trying to stop you, and should clue you into the idea that you're probably near the end of this level. All that remains is to return the gold key to the console in which it fits. You'll reward the exit, a rocket launcher, and a host of demonic enemies with which to engage in a little bit of target practice. But yeah, safe to say I quite enjoyed this one. Very good use of the space, and creative use of slip gates too. Pretty damn neat. Another map I thought was pretty damn neat was Shadow and Flame. This map, if I had to describe it in one sentence, would be the Quake map equivalent of but wait, there's more. This is a subterranean citadel filled with medieval monstrosities that seems pretty simple at first glance, but keeps throwing in convolutions each step of the way, making tremendously good use of the available space with regards to the map size, while also doing a good job of recycling previously visited areas with augmented bits of challenge. An early section here has you chopping up a room full of some unruly undead with the upgraded axe, before moving swiftly on to the upper sections of the level, where lost souls break in through the ceiling and teleporting wizards generally prove to be a nuisance. But if the upper parts of this map constitute the Shadow, then the lower sections certainly constitute the Flame, a lake of lava proving to be a noticeable hazard. Fighting your way around the flames leads you to a room with a Death Knight and a switch, pressing it, giving you the unmistakable sound of a Vor. It's not even just one Vor. It's not even just two, but three. Mercifully, you don't have to fight them all at the same time. Flicking the switch across the lake gives you the key in the room that you just came from, as well as a bunch of goons for you to fight on the return trip. Some Ultra Death Knights and a bunch of troublesome wizards bar the path as you make your way back to the ground floor, whereupon you can use the key on the door that no doubt holds a Shambler, because of course it's a Shambler. It's always a Shambler. Taking down the big guy gives you a clean shot at the exit slipgate, and you can wipe the sweat from your brow as you realize there's more. A retracting grate drops you unceremoniously back to the lava lake below, and you honestly start to wonder what else this map actually has in store for you, because it's done as much as it can with this section as far as I could tell at the time. We've got these platforms that let you hop across, but then again there's that tantalizing red armor foreshadowing a bigger fight to come. Yup. I'd say that this map is certainly up there when it comes to me picking favorites from this particular map jam. It's just consistently playful in the manner with which it pulls the rug out from under your feet, and crucially, it never feels like it's being cruel with its ambushes or setups. There's always room to maneuver, there's always places to take cover if necessary, and quite frankly, it's a joy to play, even if it can't resist just one last ambush before the end. This next map has an interesting setup. It's essentially structured around the idea of a scavenger hunt. You've got to collect X number of critical items in order to unlock the exit and be able to leave. And this affords a lot of freedom when it comes to the layout of the level itself, because it's less around the idea of linear progression, flipping switches, collecting keys, more along the lines of making sure you keep your eyes peeled for devious hiding spots. Supplementing this style of map is a host of traps which can be disabled in order to aid progression, as well as a collection of tricksy encounters with enemies, often in claustrophobic spaces. All in all, I'd say that this map does a pretty good job with the concept. For the most part, it keeps its locations in terms of critical items devious, but not too devious, save for maybe one, which involved an underwater vent swim that required you to be extra uber attentive with what turns and twists you take, and that took me a good long while to find right at the end when I was feeling a little, eager to move on. But up until that point, I'd say it does a pretty damn fine job of giving you this wonderful Swiss cheese map to explore and packing it full of relatively fun encounters, aside from all the poisonous stuff, which can go screw itself. The first thing you should absolutely positively not do in train station infiltration is press that first button. It's the alarm. It'll get you killed. What you should do instead is try to proceed as stealthily as possible. This includes not walking into a laser fence, and also includes not jumping into what appears to be a tantalizing shortcut in the wall. Timing, as in all stealth missions, is very much key. Knowing the right moment to strike is essential. Shit. I can't help but wish that train station infiltration had the confidence to go its entire length committed to the idea of stealth, even if it requires your enemies to be as deaf as a post. That said, I can certainly understand the urge for an author to want to liven up the midsection of a map such as this with the odd smattering of combat. Amusingly, this section just keeps piling on the enemies until you are quite frankly overwhelmed, and waits for you to eventually stumble onto the idea of simply running away. At least that's the idea that I personally stumbled across. I just figured that I probably wouldn't have enough ammunition to fully take care of a room full of angry grunts wielding grenade launchers. But in any case, ascending up the ladder returns you to a more stealthily paced section of level, tasking you with figuring out a way past some admittedly tricksy looking guard placements. But really, the object here isn't to focus on these guards at all. Bonus points for anyone who can figure out why that's a terrible idea. What you should be focusing on instead is what this switch actually unlocks. It reveals a section of wall leading to a mandatory secret, which is essential if you want to bypass the guard placement in the halls adjacent. The final ladder will lead you to a room containing the final setup of the map, involving 2 Vors and a keycard. It feels like the setup to a joke when I phrase it like that, but naturally, getting the keycard will activate the Vors and force you to kite your way around the arena while a very, very slowly opening door reveals a bunch of flamethrower dudes behind it. In all honesty, it does feel like it leans a little too hard on the slightly trollish setups of each floor, rather than leaning into the idea of what can be done with the idea of stealth. I mean, I see the seed of good ideas within it, but it's clear that this attempt is very much early days. Taking a turn for the more appropriately wintry, we have Frozen Demise. This is a map that you'll find at the higher end of the hub map, and it's just a high-quality experience through and through. Kicking off in a very picturesque frozen lake at the top, it soon has you delving beneath the surface and exploring the frozen tunnels beneath. These inevitably lead you to the barred and guarded door of a somewhat ominous-looking crypt. But one of the reasons why I enjoy this map so much is that it makes the restriction of the map size just melt away in the back of your mind. It feels much bigger than it actually is, and that is easily illustrated by these first few sections that we've already explored, going from that frozen lake above ground to the frozen tunnels just below, the crypt, and then the corpse pit even below that. It's a map that just feels like it keeps on giving. Something that certainly contributes to this feeling is that it reserves just enough space away from the bigger encounters to give you something extra to go and explore. And this is optional. You don't have to do this. There is a silver key that I've already acquired that will take me back up to the surface and unlock the next portion of this level's journey. But no, there's always something a little extra for you to poke your nose into, and the rewards are usually well worth the effort. Teleporting back to the top grants you the gold key and places you in a confrontation with a Krampus and its usual gaggle of goons. From here, the descent is resumed, and as you can imagine, there are more formidable enemies here standing between you and the bottom. The gold key unlocks an adjacent room on the same floor filled with enemies, again making this place feel much bigger than it actually is, before leading you even further deeper into its bowels, where the theme returns once again to that of the Frozen Demise. Naturally, these enemies won't stay frozen for long. Once you pick up the rune here, they will begin to break free of their icy prisons, but in all honesty, at this point, if you've done enough exploring, you'll have come across more than enough weaponry to make taking down these enemies a relatively straightforward endeavor. But as I said earlier, this is a tremendously high-quality experience, a rock-solid map that does fantastic work with the space afforded to it, genuinely feels bigger than it actually is, and is just testament to where a fair bit of clever mapping and obviously a good eye for visuals will get you. Speaking of clever mapping and visuals, I'd be extremely remiss if I didn't at least mention the likes of NOQUARTER, a rather picturesque map taking place on a sheer mountainside cliff that not only contains a cave full of shamblers, but also a base full of irritable grunts. Bonus point for this ogre that just straight up vaults over some boxes to try and hit you in the face with some grenades. For some reason, that just greatly amused me. But in terms of structure, there's a lot of good toing and froing throughout the course of this level. Ascending so you can grab yourself some better weaponry, so you can in turn return to that cave full of shamblers and get the key that you need to progress further upwards. The cave also raises the issue of, is there such a thing as too many shamblers? Because there's at least 5 of the suckers down here. Mercifully though, you don't have to tackle them all at the same time. The remainder of the map has the lion's share of the action take place within the outpost, the Silver Key granting you access to higher floors and introducing you to some fun combat encounters. One in particular introducing you to a laser grid dead end, forcing you to retreat, but then steadily teleporting in more enemies, culminating in the walls pulling back and introducing even more enemies into the mix. It's a wonderfully chaotic little section. A few entertaining detours will loop you through the outpost until you finally acquire the gold key, which will then grant you access to its final section up on the rooftop. In the meantime, you'll also be able to check out a few datapads scattered around the outpost itself, cluing you into what life was like before you turned up and just murdered everyone. As for that rooftop fight, chaos. Wonderful, escalating chaos. A sequence of ever stronger enemies will teleport in once you've dealt with a preceding wave, culminating in an enemy type that I've taken to just calling the Uber Scrag. There's 3 of these, they're immune to lightning, but happily more than vulnerable to a good old-fashioned rocket to the face. Your ultimate reward for dispatching all of the Uber Scrags is a Slipgate portal exit. And a Shambler. Always a Shambler. Thankfully, it's not too difficult to take down. Really, the final boss of this level is the jump between you and the Slipgate exit. Just make sure you judge the distance. Christ, this video is already over 20 minutes long. There's too many good maps, damn it! Another great map is Entering the City of Pale. It's either that or Entering the City of Dale. I can't tell, the font is a little too tiny, but I'm gonna say a city called Pale sounds more plausible than a city called Dale. This one has you fighting from the sewers to the rooftops on multiple levels and is, again, a sterling example of rock-solid mapping and really nice-looking visuals. Also, made me question what I was doing by completely ruining this poor ogre's fishing trip. Much like the preceding levels, this once again makes really great usage of the limited space afforded to it, having you looping around the same section multiple times, but still introducing enough new stuff to keep it interesting before allowing you to progress onwards and upwards. I'd have to say that by far my favorite section of this map would have to be the rooftop portion, which in of itself is divided into 3 separate sections height-wise, and all of this comes together to lend it a tremendous sense of flow when the shit truly hits the fan, and you've got to keep that movement going in order to prevent yourself from taking too many hits. The very final section here has you flipping a switch, enabling the excruciatingly slow extension of the exit bridge. In the meantime, you'll be making use of all of that wonderful space up here by contending with a horde of enemies descending upon you. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's tremendously well made, tremendously well executed. Just high quality shit. Oh, and a Shambler at the end. We don't want to forget about that. Fully Integrated was fun, if initially bewildering as all heck. Kicking off in this room full of ankle-deep industrial wastewater, it tasks you with simply figuring out how to leave it. Killing enemies doesn't unlock anything, there are no switches to flip. Instead, you have to eventually figure out that the hunk of machinery in the middle of the room is somehow key to your progression. This took me a while to figure out. After that, though, I think I can accurately sum up the rest of this level as mechs, and admittedly some fun navigation around an open switch hunt-led environment. It's actually pretty fun once you get past that initial hump. Quite the fan of how it all wraps up as well, all that switch flipping connecting various breakers until you unlock a chamber in the middle that may or may not result in you merging and becoming one with the machine. Did I just create the Strog? Am I the goddamn Macron? To say that Moonlit Keep is ever so slightly convoluted would be a massive understatement. This is a heavily switch-led map, with a sideline in the occasional breakable wall, breakable vent, and the casual shoot switch. If I'm gonna be honest, I'm probably overplaying the convolution of this level. The switches, for the most part, are pretty well placed. It doesn't take too much effort to divine the location, but at some point I did hit upon a bit of a snag. And that came in the form of this location here, where you pick up the upgraded axe, and I imagine you're supposedly ambushed by a few undead, but it didn't really seem to happen. There was a bit of an awkward silence in this corridor, and as it happens, once the door closed behind me, I couldn't actually figure out how to leave. Eventually, I no-clipped my way out, and I'm reasonably sure that I missed something, because I can't imagine this got through and spent an entire year in circulation without someone picking up on a hitch that big. So feel free to point out what I did wrong and call me a big fat dum-dum in the comments. I probably deserve it, but yeah, I think from that point onwards I managed to screw up the progression of the level and had to find a alternate way forward. For me, that took the form of heading around the opposite side of the map once I noticed that the bricks I'd been breaking exposed a place I'd already been, so I tried to figure out if there was something I could take advantage of down here. As it happens, I noticed this little protruding edge and decided to give it a go. Lo and behold, it actually granted me access to the next section above. Now, I can't be sure whether that was a normal part of progression in this level, but still, I'm convinced that I broke something here. And in the process, appeared to have inadvertently discovered a pretty significant skip. In any case, moving forward has you dancing through a gore-soaked saw blade trap before swiftly landing yourself in a confrontation with the good old Krampus. I'm just realizing at this point that it's probably actually not known as the Krampus. Screw it. Heading around the other side of the balcony bags you the gold key. Heading back gets you in a fight with a bunch of wizards. Gold key door gives you access to a lift which takes you down to the basement level. Then it's boom, 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 and you're in a fight with an Uberscrag. Have to admit, this level also had some good secrets to uncover as well. I was a fan of the one that required me to smash some stained glass, smash wall, flick a switch, open another wall, flick a switch behind that wall, which opens another wall up top. You get over to that and get some free ammo for weapons that I didn't quite have yet. At some point I drunkenly managed to find my way onto the roof. Not quite sure how that happened. Sounds like my average night out, but yeah. There's a fair bit of fun level design here. I just wish that I could have experienced it in its entirety. I'll have to come back to this sometime whenever I figure out what exactly I mucked up. And to play us out, we have got Chapel Perilous. This was an early map that I enjoyed during the course of the Quake Christmas Jam 2018, and like many of the maps that I've featured here during the course of this video, does a pretty damn good job of utilizing the available real estate. In all honesty, this is a really tightly designed map. The lion's share of the action is spent in this central structure which you attempt to ascend, but sometimes the contrivance will be that you need to drop down in order to find an alternate route to get higher than you were previously. The danger of this map is that you can occasionally fall off the edge to the ring-fenced area below it, but this below is softened somewhat with the inclusion of teleport shortcuts. And this means that, mercifully, in the majority of cases, you'll be able to pick up right where you left off. This map has a genuinely good sense of progression to it. Not only is Ascension met with an escalation in terms of dangerous enemies, but also in terms of expansion of your armory. If I could probably offer any criticism against it, it would probably be the fact that it maybe stocks you up a little too generously when it comes to the trials ahead. There came a point where I don't think my health dipped below 100 for a good long while, and that was after having to face Shamblers, Lost Souls, the occasional Vor, but then again that could have just been a sign that I might have needed to notch up the difficulty to hard from normal. By the time you get to the top, however, things get wonderfully frantic, throwing all sorts of varieties at you, from Uberscrags to pitch black creatures to death knights. Pretty sure there's a Shambler in there somewhere, because let's face it, when is there not a Shambler in the mix? But the aspect of this fight that I found entertaining was just the sheer number of bodies in the way between you and that quad damage, because you know it's just going to make life easier, and just fighting your way through is quite a lot of fun. And thus ends my showcase of A fair chunk of maps from Christmas Jam 2018. Quite frankly, I didn't expect to get up to about 13, but here we are nonetheless. If you're wondering why I haven't covered the others, it's for a variety of reasons, chief amongst which being I like my sanity, and I like to leave a few things to the imagination. So if you're interested in picking this one up for yourself, the link, as usual, is in the description below. I certainly advise you to do so. It's quite a lot of fun. For those of you out there that have watched this far and are wondering why I didn't cover Christmas Jam 2019, that would be because while I was midway editing this is when I found out that that one actually got released. So, I'd started, so I decided to finish. But don't be too disheartened about that fact, because there is more than ample opportunity in the next few days or so for me to maybe do an extra Christmassy live stream featuring Christmas Jam 2019. So all I'll say to that end is keep your eyes peeled. But yes, thoroughly enjoyed my time with this map pack, and I certainly hope you enjoyed spending this fair chunk of time listening to me ramble on about it. In particular, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so very much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits, maybe you'd like to gain early access to my videos before anyone else, heck, maybe you just enjoy the smell of burning money. If that's the case, you'll find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. I genuinely hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas wherever you are around the world. I'd love to hear what you thought about this video in the comments below, and I'd love to hear any suggestions that you have for future editions of Mod Madness, be it Quake, Doom, Duke, or otherwise. Let me know, I'm all ears. But until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.